In ancient Israel, after giving birth, some women were required to wait a specified amount of time before they could appear in the temple or participate in religious rituals. And so once that time had elapsed, they rejoined community worship by offering 2 sacrifices. When a woman gives birth, she's partaking intimately in a divine action, co-creating with God the Father. Remember God's first command in the Scriptures: be fruitful and multiply. His very first rule he gave humanity. And so God gave humans the grace to be co-creators of the human race. And this is a grace that was not taken away from us through original sin. We've kept this. So at the time of Jesus' birth, it was appropriate that a woman abstain from normal activities immediately after giving birth, in the same way that we see Moses would cover his face with a veil after his meetings with God. When humans take part in a divine encounter, we rest. It's also why the Sabbath day is a day of rest. After we encounter the Lord in our prayer, we go home and rest. And it's this type of thing that we see Mary and Joseph doing in our gospel this morning. One of the details of this passage shows us something very interesting about the Holy Family. For her sacrifice, Mary offers 2 pigeons instead of the usual combination of a lamb and a pigeon. There's a stipulation in the Jewish law that allowed for families too poor to offer a lamb to offer 2 pigeons instead. And so Jesus Christ, eternal God and Lord of the universe, not only became man on Christmas, but he became a member of a normal, humble, working class family. A family that had to worry about making ends meet. Mary, Queen of heaven and earth, lived her incomparably holy life as a wife and mother on a very small budget. Joseph, patron of the universal church and patriarch of all patriarchs, worked hard just to keep bread on the table. They had to keep track of every penny, and yet they were the richest family in history. Their wealth wasn't in money, it was in faith. Faith is our most precious possession because it enables us to have a relationship with God. And that's what we're created for. It's through a deep, ongoing personal relationship with God that our lives become full of meaning for ourselves and those around us. That's what happened with Abraham. God asked him to do 2 things that were difficult for him, as we heard in our first and second reading. First, he asked him to take his wife and belongings, to leave his homeland and become a nomad, to go to a land that I will show you, we heard in the Scriptures. God didn't give him a GPS or Google Maps. Instead, God gave him a chance to exercise and therefore to grow in faith, to enter into a personal relationship with him, a relationship built on trust. Then, after miraculously giving Abraham and Sarah a child in their old age, he again asked Abraham to do something that he hadn't completely understood, to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice. Abraham was willing to do so because he believed in God, and he knew that God never asks things that are unwise or evil. And of course, we all know from the book of Genesis that God did not require Abraham to sacrifice his son. But Abraham put his faith in God. And as a result, he became wise, good, and fulfilled. And God was able to do wonderful things in and through his life. The source of Abraham's greatness, his true wealth, was his faith. That relationship of trust and confidence with God. This is why the church has always spoken of the virtue of poverty. It is the virtue by which we recognize that our relationship with God is infinitely more valuable than anything else. The virtue of poverty doesn't mean that we should force people to starve in the streets living in squalor. The virtue of poverty is not misery. It's interior detachment from material things, which is why Jesus also says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Jesus has made it clear that true meaning and happiness in life doesn't come from things, but from relationships. First, our relationship with God, and second, our relationships with each other. By keeping our friendship with God through daily prayer, the Eucharist, and fidelity to God's will, we can experience the same wealth that Mary and Joseph experienced, the interior wealth of faith. If money is our top priority, we tend to treat other people as tools or objects. But if Christ is our top priority, other people become fellow travelers on the road to heaven. In a few moments, we'll renew our faith by professing the Creed. And so let's do so with sincerity from our hearts. And when Jesus comes to us again in Holy Communion, let's thank him for being a God that is rich in mercy and for making us rich in the things that really matter. And let's promise that we will do our best to help others find this same treasure of faith.